Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you like the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Welcome to today's webinar, sponsored by Your Dog's Friend, a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. Our speaker today is Rebecca Melanson. Rebecca is a registered veterinary technician and certified training partner with the Karen Pryor Academy. She's also a fear-free certified and has completed the Family Paws program. Rebecca works with the veterinary behaviorist resident at Atlantic Veterinary Behavior and enjoys using her multifaceted training to help animals with behavior concerns. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit, so if you find this webinar helpful, please consider making a donation to help support these free webinars and other free resources that we offer. If you would like to donate, you can visit our website at yourdogsfriend.org and click on the donate button in the upper right-hand corner. We appreciate everyone's support. So let's get started with today's webinar. I'm sure everyone's really interested in the topic. So over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you. So welcome. There's a lot of topics and a lot of things we can discuss about dogs and kids living together. And often dogs really struggle with kids. So I tried to kind of do some general safety guidelines. I'm sure I could make 10 more webinars on this. So I do hope that you get something out of it. So the overview, we're going to go over some management methods that parents can use to create safety between dog and child. We're going to look at some safe and unsafe interactions between dogs and children. We see a lot of videos on YouTube about kids crawling on dogs, and a lot of people think it's really cute, but it's actually very harmful. We're going to discuss some dog body language. That way it gives you a bit of tools to see when your dog is starting to become quite stressed and how we can kind of mitigate it from escalating to growling, snapping, and biting. We're also going to check out some parent-guided activities for relationship building with dogs. So safely. It's not going to be the kids running around with the dogs. It's going to be the parent kind of managing this type of play. And then we're going to look at skills that the dog should know before the baby arrives. So this was off of a veterinary journal. So children under the 10 years that are under 10 years of age are considered to be at highest risk. And often it's because they cannot properly read the dog. If we look at toddlers, like ages 2 to 3 years old, they're often quite unbalanced. So especially when they're learning to walk, they're learning to crawl, this can be really, really concerning for dogs. And because their fine motor skills are not that developed, you see a lot of grabbing, maybe poking some eyes. A lot of things can go wrong. So we're always going to look at safety first. Always safety first. It's going to be our #1 priority. And we may have to even look at considering 2 layers of safety, which I'll discuss further on. These are some great quotes from Family Paws. So when I took the course, I learned so much from that program. If you guys have never heard of Family Paws, please check them out at familypaws.com. So some of the quotes that I've heard from Jen was, "Dog and baby on the scene. We want a parent in between." So active supervision, this is a great example. It's not the dog and the child interacting together, roughhousing together. There's very much a parent that's actively engaged with the child and the dog. So I want to make sure that's a layer of safety. I want to see that. Proactive is another great way to manage dogs and kids, and that is very much as simple as placing a gate. It could be an X pen or a baby pen, whatever you got, you can have that layer in between. And as you can see on the far right of the photo, there is a parent actively on scene. So if anything happens, let's say the dog jumps the gate or what have you, you're going to have a parent to be able to mitigate that. What I don't want to see is absent supervision. I don't want to see any child and dog left unattended. Things can go haywire like nobody's business. I have seen some families where the kids are very hyper, they're very loud, they're squeaky. That can escalate quite a few dogs. That can make them quite nervous. And with that, I have seen and I've had cases where the parents weren't even around and then they heard the dog growl and snap at a child. So then I get the call way too late. But that's what happens. And they didn't know. They had no idea. They had no information to tell me what events happened leading up to this situation. So I want to make sure there's always somebody there. Passive is also not that great because you're busy doing something and you're just kind of keeping your eye on your baby. That is a recipe for disaster. You want to make sure that you're always actively supervising if they're going to be in the same room together. Similarly with reactive, I know this dog has no escape route. And then we have a child that's crawling into his space. This is how kids get bitten. And kids often get bitten in the face because that tends to be where they're at eye level. They tend to be as tall as dogs, or if they're crawling and the dog is resting, they're very much at eye level. And we tend to see a lot of bites to the face. In a reactive situation like this, a parent could just be like, oh, no, 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 and then remove the child, but it could be too late at that point. So this is not a good situation. I can't stress this enough that dogs have feelings. They have their own wants, their own needs, and we really have to respect autonomy. A lot of dogs have, especially older dogs, do have underlying arthritic pain. And if we have children crawling over our senior dogs and the dog is painful, this is where a dog will absolutely bite. And that you can't necessarily blame them and you can't necessarily blame the child. So the parent needs to make sure that any interactions between the dog and their child is going to be safe. So if the first step would be invites decreases bites. So it's not necessarily the kid approaching the dog. It's the kid learning to communicate and asking the dog if they want to interact. And how they can do that is just by calling the dog over or having, like the mom here in this photo has her child in between her legs and holding, and the mom can call the dog over to see if he or she wants to interact with them. Appropriate interactions here would be one hand is enough and two hands is too rough. Most dogs hate hugs, and the dogs that tend to love hugs often only appreciate them from adults, right? They don't, I kind of like, this is a bit anecdotal, but dogs don't necessarily see children as predictable adults, and they can be comfortable with the adults doing the hugs and not the kids, and that's fine, that's normal. So any type of petting, we want to make sure it's one hand and there's no hugging and there's no grabbing, because that's going to cause a lot of stress in our dogs. Hugging is not an innate behavior for dogs. This is what humans do. Similarly to like handshakes and things like that. So a lot of people are like, reach out to the dog so you can sniff your hand. That reaching can be very threatening for dogs. So we don't even want to do that. This is a great example of a dog that's uncomfortable with the situation and is showing very mild signs of stress. And the licks that we see that the dog does on the baby at the beginning of the video, we call that a kiss to dismiss. It's not, dog's not tasting the baby, the dog's not giving it love, the dog is worried. You see a bit of kissing there. We have the licking of the lips, we have the yawn. These are very subtle stress signs. And we might look at this video and think it's cute because the baby's cute, but the dog is clearly uncomfortable. You see the furrowed brow, the whale eye, the dog's checking in with mom, like, are you going to do something about this? A little bit more kissing. So that's not love licks. That is kiss to dismiss. She's very worried, but she wants to hang out with her people, but not necessarily have the baby in her face. She's quite lovely. So that's just an example of videos that we often see, which we think are cute, but the dog is actually quite worried, and we wanna help her out here. So as I mentioned earlier about the dog behavior repertoire, dogs, when they greet each other, there's a lot of bounciness, right? They tend to sniff each other's rears. They don't often go face to face or head on or stare each other in the eyes like people do. So that's something that humans do. We teach our kids too. We teach our kids to look at your other fellow human in the eyes when you're talking. We tend to shake hands when we're greeting. We may give hugs when we're greeting as well, like I mentioned earlier. But with dogs, it's very much they get each other's scent. They may start jumping on each other. They may do play bows. It's very different from how humans greet. So that's where it's very important for how we as parents, if you are a parent, interacts with your dog. And as your child watches, they're going to do the same thing. So it's very good to show your kid that, when we're interacting with the dog, we don't hug the dog. So you're going to have to stop hugging the dog if that's what you're already doing. So, because the kid's going to do that. If you're approaching your dog while they're resting, we don't recommend approaching any dog while they're sleeping. But if you start doing that because they look very cute, well, the kid's probably going to want to do that too. So it's really important that how you interact with your dog is going to be how you want your child to interact with the dog. And that's going to be one hand, calling them over. If you're playing with toys, it's not playing with your hands. You're going to use actual toys, like throwing a ball. So lots of fun things. This is a great chart made by Fear Free. It's a great organization that really, really helped me when I was working in clinical practice. Really helped me with not getting bit because back in the day when I started as a technician, it was very much the classic pin them down to get stuff done. And that is still prevalent to this day in many, many vet hospitals. But the ones that are really on board with Fear Free, you're going to see a much better outcome of the pet because they're not in there freaking out and trying to bite you. And then there's also the safety of the staff. So this handout is one of the core handouts that they kind of showed us for us to better read dogs. Because in school, we learned, and this was like 12 years ago, we learned very little about animal behavior, canine behavior, like dog body language, like forget it. We were never taught that. And same with veterinarians. Even to this day, a lot of vet schools don't even go over this stuff. So it's a really great service that Fear Free provides to us. So often dogs start with very, very subtle signs of stress. So that can just be panting, avoiding eye contact, lifting their little leg, moving away, right? These are very subtle signs. The more we ignore these signals, that's when the dog starts to escalate. And that is true for all species because conflict is very expensive. Dogs don't, or any animal doesn't want to get into an actual fight because if they get injured, then they die, right? Or may die. So it's very important for us to read those subtle signs and respect those signs. So let's say, you are approaching a dog and the dog starts to lip lick, avoid eye contact, turn away, and then we keep going forward. So then the dog's tail tucks and maybe they start tightening into a ball. And then we try to reach the dog and then it starts to escalate to like a growling. And then the more we ignore this, then they're going to go to the snapping and the biting. So it's a really great way. You can get this handout on fearfreehappyhomes.com. So it's something you can even go over with your children on how to better read the dog to make sure that they actually want to engage with them. So management. I use so much management. It's unreal, especially with behavior modification plans. We always want to use management to set pets up for success and not for failure. Because if we set pets up for success, then we can actually start reinforcing behaviors that we like. And as we know, the more you reinforce a behavior through positive reinforcement, the more the pet is going to want to do it because it makes them feel good. So in this instance for management is going to be that little pen that's around the boy here. And then we have this nice little bed. So I know many of you are probably familiar with mat training, so we can reinforce laying on the mat while the child plays with treats and toys, or like he's got his little stuffy here. Management is also used to reduce the rehearsal of anxiety or prevent the rehearsal of undesirable behaviors. So the more a pet practices any type of behavior, including stress, the more he's going to be the better he's going to be at it, including the more anxious he's going to be. So we want to make sure that we keep everybody safe and that we keep the pets' mental health safe as well. Success stations are what I use a lot to help, especially if you have like a child in the high chair or you're eating at the dinner table. You don't necessarily want the dog all up in your face. Or if you want your child to have a bit more liberty around the home and do their little rip arounds or their zoomies, we can set up these little success stations so that the dog is nice and tucked away, but not in distress. It also helps with having the dog included in activities. So it's not a segregation, it's just a division. So the dog is still involved with you, but they have like a layer of safety here. So the dog on the left, we have that nice tether on the nice cute little relaxation mat, where mom or dad here, I'm not too sure, is holding their presumably baby. Here we just have a little baby gate while the dog is enjoying a Kong. And this is my friend's dog, Diefenbaker. He's enjoying his Kong in his crate. So these are all ways that we can kind of keep the dog happy and the child happy and everybody's safe. So this is essentially mealtime. So I never want to see kids handing out food to dogs from their high chairs. I don't want dogs up in there, especially dogs that resource guard. You think that'd be kind of common sense, but I have seen it. There's people that are like, oh, I know my dog resource guards, and they still let the dog, be around the child and food. So I don't want to see that. You're more than welcome to let the dog go and get all the scraps once your child is done eating. That's totally fine. Enrichment is always going to be key here. It doesn't always have to be food. Enrichment can be many, many things. It can be like walks in the park, play in the backyard, anything to meet your dog's needs. If your dog does not have their needs met, this is when we tend to see a bit more rowdiness, I guess you could say, a bit more frustration. They tend to be a bit more agitated. So it's really important to, even though you have a kid, to not neglect your dog because you're too busy with your child. So try to find ways to meet your dog's needs. And a really great way to do that, especially when it comes with enrichment, are getting these licky mats that you see here. So these licky mats are pretty great because you can pre-make them and freeze them, which I love. So when you're busy with your kid and they have to go to I don't know, daycare or, kindergarten or school, grade 1, grade 2, you want to have something kind of you could just take out of the freezer and give to the dog and away you go. Chews are really great. If you have an anxious dog, a dog that's already quite fearful, any type of repetitive behavior can help decrease that stress. So the licking of the licky mats, the chewing of the chews, sniffing of snuffle mats, things like that. So if you're eating at the table, give them something nice. If you want to have some fun like tummy time, especially with your young ones where they're kind of learning how to crawl, so they have tummy time and your dog wants to be all up in their face. Well, let's either, put them in their crate, have that little barrier to divvy up the living room so the dog can have something to do on one side while you can safely play with your child on the other. Some parent guided activities. So this is something I tend to start implementing when the kids are a bit older. So around 4, usually around 4 years of age. 3, it really depends. I know they all develop kind of differently. So one of the games that I really like here is fetch. So this is where you can help your kid throw the ball. The dog runs over, gets the ball, comes back, and the parent can actually pick up the ball to give back to the child and then throw it again. So it's a great way for the dog to start forming positive associations with the young one as they get older. And it becomes like a predictable activity. And dogs love predictability. Here on the right, we have parent guided touch is what we call this. So with this in mind, if you have a little toddler that really, really wants to pet the dog, because their fine motor skills are a bit all over the place, you can actually help them out and just hold their little hand to help pet the dog just to get that touch. We like to touch things. It's like us as humans, we're primates. We just like to touch things. And not all dogs want to be touched. So you got to read the room a little bit. And another really great game that you could use too, that I learned from Family Paws, is you can actually get like some peanut butter on a spoon and play hide and seek in your house. So you can have your kid with you. The kid can hold like this big wooden spoon with some peanut butter on it, and you can hide and you can call the dog's name. And then the dog can come and find you and then lick some of the peanut butter off of the spoon. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be expensive. It's just some nice little relationship building activities as the kid gets older. Another great line from Family Paws. So tight spaces equal grumpy faces. So that was further back and earlier in my presentation, we looked at having the kid that was crawling under the table. So that's a tight space, and that can absolutely create a grumpy face. So we have things here. Look, we have the dog, we have the mom on the couch, and then we have the kid. So both of them are kind of squished between the table and the sofa. So that can cause a lot of stress with dogs. Similarly with going down the hallways, right? This picture is kind of cute because you see the little lip lick here, but it's a tight space, and that can cause some stress in dogs. You just gotta be mindful with it. And then yes, we don't want kids crawling. If the dog is resting, we don't want the child going approaching the dog that's resting. We leave them alone, especially if they're resting with a high valued resource like a bone or any type of food toy. So this is an example of a tight space. There's not a lot of room there between the couch and the table, and now the dog has a resource, and the dog looks visibly worried. And I know this is like a moment in time, it's a picture, so we don't actually see like the whole thing as you would with a video, but you can still see the whites of the eyes. The ears are slightly parted sideways, and then he's kind of giving you the side eye, the furrowed brow. So those are all subtle stress signs that often people miss. People miss that a lot. So this is a video to kind of show you the perspective of the dog and why it might be a little bit distressing to them. So you have the kid that's crawling forward and staring straight into the camera. So if you had a dog laying here, this would be a baby crawling towards them and giving them direct eye contact. And that freaks out a ton of dogs. And not to mention, as cute, like the baby's adorable, but even the way the baby moves is very unpredictable. It's a lot of wobbles. It's very unpredictable. Dogs love predictability. They need that in their lives. It's a cute baby though. Yes, and then the grab. We definitely don't want the grab. So some of the skills. So I'm not going to go over how to teach the skills. This is where you can ask somebody from Family Paws or your dog's friend, right? There's lots of trainers out there that can kind of teach you these skills, but I'll kind of give you some brief tips on how to do it. So crate training, I want all dogs to know crate training to the best of their ability. And I know we can't really generalize and say like all dogs can do this skill, but the vast majority of dogs can do it. So I like crate training because it creates a safe space. So if it's really crazy in the house and you have kids running around screaming, I want your dog to actually have the space to retreat and be comfortable. I tend to really like crates that are covered and that kind of dampen a bit of the external stimuli. Depending on the dog, some dogs like bedding at the bottom, some dogs would prefer it to be nice and cold, hard surface, which is fine. We want to make sure that the dog is able to have like a place to decompress and act as a barrier. So if you know your dog gets really anxious when your kid has friends over and there's chaos, I would rather the dog be tucked away with a nice chew or, a licky mat or what have you, and just kind of chill for the couple of hours that the friends are over. And of course, we never want to use the crate as punishment. This really needs to be the dog's happy place. And often a way to kind of start this behavior is just by feeding all of their meals in there. Anytime they go in, you can toss a treat. You can also hide treats in the blanket. So really make this the best spot in the universe. Stationing or mat training is another great skill. We can use it as a means to relocate the dog from an undesirable location or situation. So if the dog is getting up in your child's face, we can just ask them to go to their place. And I call it stationing because it'd be kind of fun I do this a lot, especially with parrots, because I do a lot of work with parrots. Is we teach a stationing, and the station can be anything. So it can be like a mat in a specific room. You can have multiple stations. You can have multiple mats in many rooms for the dog to be able to go to. We always want to teach the dog what to do instead of what not to do. That's kind of the main takeaway. And what's kind of nice with mat training is you can actually bring it places. So if you make that mat training a really great place, just like the crate, it's something that you can bring to the vet clinics. You can bring to the groomers. If the dog gets stressed in the car, you can bring it in the car. So there's lots of uses for it. It doesn't necessarily have to be just for when you're managing dog in a house full of kids. And because we're giving them guidance, we're teaching them what to do. And when we use positive reinforcement, we're teaching them what to do so that way they feel good doing it. It can de-escalate them from a stressful situation. So if you're let's say your dog is growling at your child, and a lot of people get really, really worried about dogs when they start to growl, and they think growling is bad. We look at growling as like bad dog, bad dog. But really, growling is communication, and we really shouldn't be punishing it. So in that situation, instead of us making it worse by yelling at the dog or grabbing the dog, we're just going to say, hey, how about you go to your place? Go to your place. And we try to use a happy voice. Animals are very in tune with how we use words, how we say it. We always say it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and that's very true. So even though you're really worried, try to use your happy, fun voice. Target training is another great one, and it's easier to teach than mat training. So if you have a dog that's really struggling with understanding how to station in a specific spot, we can use target training. And that is literally touching their nose to your hand. It's a very simple skill. And honestly, it's a skill that I teach everyone. It's not very specific. It's like everybody knows target training. Every animal that I work with, like every species that I work with, they all learn target training because it's so easy for them to do. And again, if your dog is in an uncomfortable situation and you're noticing the stress, ask them to touch your hand. Just come back over here. Come to me. It's fine. You'll get a treat. We'll put you in your crate because you like your crate, or we'll put you behind a gate because you're okay behind the gate. We really want to make sure that if tension is rising, if the dog is very uncomfortable with the situation with your child, that we just come over here. It's fine. Come to your predictable human. And then basket muzzle training. That is one, again, that I teach all dogs because your dog is going to need a basket muzzle at one point or another, whether it's in the home, whether it's at the groomers or the vet's office, mostly at the vet's office. It's at least a tool in your toolbox. Actually, we use muzzle training too for dogs that like to eat poop a lot. You'll have to get the one with the little poo guard, but there's many uses. There's tons of uses for this. You want to make sure that the basket muzzle you choose is not like, it's not those leather ones that like seal the dog's mouth shut. We want to make sure that they're able to pant, drink water, take treats, everything except a direct bite. And the dogs that do need to wear it, like when I work with Dr. Connolly, we tend to see like the most of extreme cases, the very, very extreme cases where the dogs do need to wear their muzzles anytime that the child is home. And when I was talking about 2 layers of safety earlier, what that looks like is we want either the dog behind a gate and wearing their basket muzzle, or behind a gate and in a crate, or on leash and wearing a basket muzzle, or on leash behind a gate. So you can see that we're just using two layers in case one of them fails. And that's often we use those techniques for the big dogs that have these outbursts, these unprovoked outbursts. And those dogs, yeah, that gets a bit more complicated. I won't dive too deep in that because that's a whole other presentation. But basket muzzle training, absolutely, especially if your dog nips at kids and things like that. I see this a lot in herding breeds. We tend to see the dogs start to nip at the kids as they're running. So basket muzzle training would be really good for those ones. And thanks for listening. I hope that hit all the time we need. Sometimes these go by super fast. But now I'm ready for questions. I love the question part.
I have a couple questions to start us off.
Let's do it.
Since summer's starting, what are some ways that we can help our dogs who are used to being home alone all day, who are now coping with the extra chaos of kids being home all day?
Oh, that is a great question. So the safe space that I mentioned earlier with a crate or even a section of the home would be really good so that the dog can move away and leave the situation. Making sure that the dogs are well exercised is going to be a big one too. So I do find dogs that are under enriched. I do see a lot of increase in stress and an increase in irritability. So we look at it as resiliency building when we're providing enrichment. So the resiliency is how well an animal can adapt to stress. So using enrichment increases resiliency so that way they're able to cope with the stress of having extra kids in the home. So doing lots of exercise and activities is going to be one way, and then providing that safe space.
Good, excellent. So along the same lines,
Hmm.
we've got kids in the summer that are sometimes home with a younger babysitter or with grandparents who don't know the dog, home alone with an older sibling. How would you recommend parents go about keeping everyone safe when they're not there to handle things?
Yeah, I guess that really depends on the individual dog. So, as I mentioned earlier, with the cases that Dr. Connolly and I see, we usually recommend to actually have the dog be boarded or going to like a professional that can handle a dog with that have special needs, essentially. When it comes to like the grandparents and things like that, that's a whole set everybody up for success, even if it means, okay, here's a brief rundown. We're gonna exercise. I'm so big into exercise. We're gonna exercise the dog before we leave. We're gonna, feed the dog at supper. We're gonna give him something to do. The dog can be tucked away in his safe space. That's totally fine. Or we can just kind of divvy it up, and you can kind of tell the grandparents basically some set rules and try not to overload them with like a million different things. And it will never be perfect. Management will fail at one point or another. So you got to prioritize.
Yeah, so
But
yeah, I mean, it's hard, but it's, something people are thinking about right now because I think what to do with the dog is the last thing on people's mind when they think
just,
about what am I gonna do with kids in the summer?
yep. Yeah. And actually, when people have their first baby, where they want to show the dog the baby, look at the baby, look at the baby, that is going to freak the dog out to like nobody's business. So it's just do what you do with the baby. Like, if you're changing the diaper, you're, feeding, you're putting them to bed, you're just doing it. You're not like making a big deal for the dog to observe what you're doing. You're just doing it.
So along those kind of same lines, what do you tell like parents to be? How do they kind of prepare the dog for what that new schedule might look like? If
Oh,
they're
yep.
like two people and one dog and the dog gets all the attention in the world, how do you kind of work towards
Yeah.
that new
Step
schedule?
step one, please seek help before the baby arrives. So not after. I'm working with a family right now where we're actually starting to unpack all of the baby's things well in advance. We're also starting to implement gates way in advance. So the dog is going to be gradually exposed to all these changes. So now we have gates in the home that weren't there before, but that's okay because now we also don't have a baby screaming at the same time as we're introducing those gates. We're also going to implement fake babies. So either it's a dog, you can also swaddle a 10-pound bag of flour to kind of mimic the weight of the baby too, because your body is going to change, like in the sense that when you're holding your baby, that kind of freaks out dogs too. I
Mhm.
want the dog to get acclimated to your new body postures, I guess, lack of a better word, your new mannerisms. So, an exercise that we end up doing is, the mom picks up the baby. If the dog is just standing there observing, we're going to pay him for that. We're going to give him treats for that. We're going to reinforce all the good things that we like that the dog does. I want to pay them for calm. Because just like anxiety, the more you reinforce calm, the more they're going to be calm. Same with baby cries, right? We start doing recordings. Dogs do know the difference. It's like the thunderstorm thing. Like you can make them listen to thunderstorm, but when the real thing happens, it's like completely different. But that is absolutely something you could do is get the dog acclimated to baby crying. The dog is calmly observing the baby crying device. We can give them
Mhm.
treats for that. But that's where the safe space comes in too, because when the baby starts crying, dogs often are like, bye. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gradual integration of things. That's the big thing. You know, the swings, the baby toys, they all make sounds, right? The baby toys make sounds. Get them used to that way before the baby comes and gradually.
Excellent, excellent ideas. So puppies, how do you work with clients that kind of have the mindset of kids and puppies growing up together and running together and chasing together and all that fabulous stuff? And then when the dog turns a year old, it's not having quite as much fun anymore with those same activities
Yeah.
the child's been doing with them for a year.
Yeah. I'm actually working with a family now of, you know, your classic jumpy mouthy puppy, which I feel I feel for them. And their kid also, he's been diagnosed with ADHD, so he's very like, oh, he's like me growing up. He was a wild child, right? I was the same way. So the dog absolutely feel like they feed on that. And this puppy is 4 months old, and anytime he's running around, then the puppy is right after him, nip, 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 and then he gets afraid of the puppy. So it's a lot of, yes, he's an older child. He's about like 7 years old. However, we still want to have a parent actively supervising these interactions. So if he gets really riled up, which is causing the dog to get really riled up, well, this is where we actually need to focus a lot more on the child and give the child different type of skills or different type of ways to play with the dog that doesn't escalate to nipping. We have to manage the child in this situation in order to manage the dog's behavior. So it's starting early, and as I mentioned early in my presentation too, what we model, they mimic. So having the parents actually engaging with the dog in the way that they want their child to engage with the dog is going to be very helpful to anticipate that 1 year of age. So it's going to get better. It should get better if the child is actively mimicking the parents. So we like to roughhouse with hands because, again, primates were hands. So we're just going to say, okay, instead of roughhousing with hands, we're going to use toys. So that way the child can start, okay, we'll use toys. And I love those dog flirt poles. And that is something that any child can use, like older child. I wouldn't give this to a toddler, but older child under parental supervision. The dog is far away from the hands, far away from the kids. You have now this big fishing line with a toy at the end.
So how about the family who gets a dog to teach the child responsibility, feeding the dog, walking the dog? When do you look at it's okay for the child to walk the dog? And I'm sure it depends on the dog and stuff, but kind of what do you tell people, and what is a safe way for a child to maybe start to learn how to walk the dog when they're
Yeah.
not really old enough to go out on their own with them?
Yeah, I always say older teens. I don't tempt fate with young like adolescents, because a lot of things can go wrong, and if there's no parent present, then things can really go wrong. So I want at least a mature teen, which is like older, so maybe like 16 plus. And yes, it's very much dependent on the child, and the child really needs to understand the rules of loose leash walking. If you have a young kid that is adamant on walking the dog, you can actually kind of do a makeshift leash where you have two handles. So that way the parent has the main handle and then the child can hold the handle. So that kind of, it's like training wheels for dog walking. And then the child feels like he's actually participating in walking the dog when really it's the parent. And by all means, some people will put the leash on the stroller, like tie the leash up to the stroller. Please don't do that. There goes the baby. If the dog decides to take off, there goes the baby. So PSA, do not tie your dog to the carriage or the stroller or what have you. When it comes to feeding, that is a bit easier, and that is actually a great relationship building exercise where you can just watch the kid, have a little measuring cup with a line on it, make it very clear this is how much you feed the dog, and then just go over. The child can ask the dog to sit, because I do like having kids participate in training when they're of age to do so. So even asking the kid to ask the dog all these little tricks and then feeding. So I think that's more acceptable than I find the leash walking, that is very tricky. Those are very good questions.
Yeah. How about the Hoover dog who lays underneath the high chair and cleans up all the food that the baby drops? Good idea, bad idea?
Bad idea. Yeah, X pen around the child or have the dog away. Either way is fine. And then once the baby's gone, then the dog can go and hoover up all the food. But yeah, you can use the X pen for either the dog or the kid. It's great. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's
I've
where it
seen
comes.
some
Yeah.
great things with X pens with fencing in play areas for kids and
Yeah.
or fencing out of space for the dog. Yeah, I think people think more of how do I fence the dog in versus
Correct.
how do I how do I corral off the child's space?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's very much like I don't want the dog to be necessarily segregated from the kid. So that's where the X-Pens can divvy up the room. So that way, they're still in the living room hanging out with their people watching TV. They just don't have direct access to the child.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michelle Stern, who's another parent-child trainer, has the quote, separated but not isolated,
Yes, that's a good
which
quote.
is, I think is a really good one
Yeah.
to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because dogs are socially obligated species. They need to have their people.
So here's a question, because I have struggled with this with a couple of my younger clients, ones who want to get in the crate with with the dog, or if the dog is sleeping on a bed, go and just, I mean, not pester him, but lay down with him and maybe pet him or whatever. How do you explain to them what safe space means and why it's important for the dog?
Yeah, how do you explain that to a child? Well, what I normally say to the adults in the room is that if you were sleeping and then your kid came up to you and then started touching you and petting you in your eyes and your ears, that would probably really annoy you. So I would probably say the same to the child as well. That's probably the analogy that I would use is like, how would you feel if I did this while you were sleeping or taking a
Yeah,
nap? And you'd probably be really upset about that. So I definitely don't recommend it. And I always say if the dog is sleeping, leave the dog alone. Leave
yeah,
the dog alone. Even if you're an adult, leave the dog alone. They need that sleep. So they need that
yeah.
sleep. Yeah.
Do you have ideas for like visual aids to help the child remember that is the dog's space? So I mean, I will have some kids like draw a sign that says,
Yes.
stop or
That's a
safe
great idea.
space, and tape it to the crate. Do you have some other
Yep.
ideas for those kinds of things?
Yep. So that actually, no, that is honestly what I do. I do the exact same thing. If your kid, especially with kids that have like learning disabilities and really struggle to remember, yes. Yep. I absolutely put signs everywhere, colorful signs. I'll even have the kids color the signs. So that way they extra remember because they actually drew them. So
Yes, yes.
yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea. Anything visual is gonna help.
Yeah, it's hard when kids, I think it's really hard when you think about bringing a new puppy home or something, and then you tell the kids, no, you can't dress it up, you can't cuddle it, you can't,
Hmm.
it's difficult.
Yep.
Um,
And yeah, and that's you have to watch them. Direct supervision. That's when you're not watching, that's when bites happen.
yeah, yeah,
That's when bites happen, and that's not good. We had I don't remember where I had it was a news article, and I don't remember if it was in Canada or in the United States, but one of the things what was saying was that they thought this bite towards this child was unprovoked because they were letting the kid ride the dog and the dog was fine, quote unquote fine. And it's just like, I'm sure this dog was absolutely not fine, especially if the
yeah.
dog went and attacked the child. So I don't know. We got to read our dogs better. We need to learn how they speak to us through body language.
We do, and I think that's really a really good thought to leave it on
Yep.
too. It's that we really need to look at what the dog is feeling. There's so many videos on YouTube that are supposed to be cute, and you can just see the dog looking at the person behind the camera saying, "Help me, please." Yeah.
Family Paws has coloring pages for kids too on dog body language, which is really great. So please sit with your
Yes,
children and go over all the pictures and draw with them and teach them what is the dog saying in the moment. Some kids are
yes.
very good. You get some really bright kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they pick up
Yeah,
on
and
stuff.
I have had a lot of my child clients really enjoy Lily Chin's doggy language. And it's such simple, small amount of text with a picture that they'll look through and, oh, my dog does this. And I've even suggested people with kids even keep it at the dinner table and they
Mhm.
find a page and talk about it at dinner or something, to
Yep.
just kind of really get talking about body language because we just don't read our dogs at all.
Yep. You'll avoid the majority of bites if you can read your dog and if your kids can read the dog.
This has been fabulous. So thank you absolutely so much, Rebecca. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.